By the end of the next day, we were sailing the Adriatic and the Mediterranean for Cardiff to take on the Stefano's cargo, 1,300 tonnes of coal for delivery to Hong Kong.
They were all very young, the people on board. The captain was the oldest, he was 26. The cabin boy was 10 or 11.
After rounding the Cape of Good Hope, their next point of land that they were going to make their sighting on was to be the west coast of Australia. And basically once they got the land in sight, that was when the wreck happened.
There were problems with the actual chart of the area. In earlier days, the charts had been showing the coast as going almost due north, whereas in fact it went slightly to the west, so it was north-northwest that it went. In 1803, Matthew Flinders' chart, which was published, continued that error. So ships were tending to go north and run into the coast.
The mate had barely returned to his post when the ship's bell sounded, 2:30 a.m. At the same time, the vessel gives a violent lunge as she grounds on a submerged rock. The sudden violence of the shock soon brings panic to the stricken sailors on deck. The swaying of the vessel to and fro, the awful rumbling noise, the ominous shivering of the sails, the horrible noise of the quivering of the chains informs them of their horrible situation.
It's amazing that so many of them did get ashore. Of the 19 odd on board, 10 actually got to shore, and that's an amazing thing given that they didn't have any lifeboats that were actually working.
For 6 long hours, the group I was with struggled toward shore. It didn't seem as if we were getting any closer to land, but slowly the clouds began to drift away, and the light of a morning star, followed by a false dawn, encouraged us. After swimming through the night, the castaways managed to land on the shore just behind me here, up near the sandhills, where they made their first camp. They were exhausted, and some of them were bleeding and hardly had any clothes at all. And it was freezing cold, so they had to bury themselves in sand to keep warm.
Jurek took the whole of that day, so he was in the water for a long period of time, clutching to a spar. He got ashore with what was described as a badly injured foot, so his chances of survival, you would think, would be even worse than the average. We decided to walk north along the beach because the wind had shifted to the south of west. We saw a large point of land jutting out into the ocean, a mile or two north, a barrier that might catch any floating material blown that direction by the wind. There was very little surf because the offshore reefs broke the force of the waves before they reached the land. They had just set up a little makeshift camp on the beach, and they didn't know what they were going to do. A small tribe of Aborigines walked into the camp and started to inspect them in terms of their injuries and so forth. We were frightened, especially because of the dangerous-looking spears they carried in their right hand and the strange, short, curved sticks they had held in their left.
Largely, they would have just been very much aware that these blokes were in real strife, that their boat had sunk, and they might have even witnessed the boat, sinking with the debris and that from the cyclone. And they would have been extremely compassionate towards them.
The terrain is particularly hostile. There's very little in the way of any trees. If a person wants to find shelter, then they have to do things like seeking out a cave. In one of their camp spots, they had water that the Aborigines had shown them that was about 2 miles from a cave. So they would spend their day in a cave, hiding from the sun, and they'd walk that 2 miles each day to the waterhole and back. There's virtually nothing in the way of shelter. The grass is, as I say, very sharp on the feet and ankles. They even referred to the fact that the sand on the beach was intolerably hot on the skin, even very early in the morning.